Warning: if you don't like animated login pages in Flutter and you don't want to be a millionaire, then this video is not for you. What is up, fellow coders? Welcome back to TwistBase. Today we're going to take a deeper dive into login forms and signup forms. We're going to step a little bit away from the traditional approaches, and we're going to make it, a bit more amusing for a user to actually sign up or log into a page. And, well, a quick preview of what we are gonna build today, and it's a simple login form on Flutter. And I'm doing some state management in here. So first things first, we're having some wavy animation at the top to make it more like a nice login feature, I guess. It gives a very subtle and calm movement, which, in my opinion, has no benefit. Maybe it calms the user a bit down when you're logging and signing up or going through that process. Just maybe. So again, when we finish the email, you're gonna see there's a tick mark at the end that does some state checking. Because we're not using a database, I'm just using a hard-coded email to check whether or not this email is correct. Just to show you the state management we can do. The state management in the password section, we are able to show the password by clicking on the visibility icon on the right. And this is something that modern forms do these days. So yeah, I thought why not implement it in this tutorial. Then if you're using on Mac or iOS, you can do Command K to toggle the keyboard. And because we are using something very custom, we need to move it up with the keyboard as well. And that's what's happening in here. So you can see that's what's going on when the user actually sees the keyboard. I thought it was maybe a bit nice to keep a little bit of the wavy animation at the top.
So badly needed. You folks know how badly needed it is.
Yeah, hello. So an animated login page in Flutter. Where do we start? Well, if I'm looking at the final products, we can start with building the UI, and afterwards we can focus on the wavy animation at the top. So let's start with that. So we can start by removing the container in the homeview.dart file. And what we actually want to build from here is, let's start with a column. And we're going to start with the children property on the column. So our first child is going to be a text field widget. And this is something we're still going to create. And it's going to be our own text field widget, because we are stepping away from a default text field widget. And if you're changing style for these widgets, it takes a lot of code. So it's, if you want to reuse it, because we're going to have two text fields in this case, it might be better if you are creating your own widget for this. And so now we can just copy this. Don't worry about the error for now, because we still have to create the class. So now we can say, let's say we're going to have password and we're going to have email as a hint text. Obscure text means you can't see it, and this is something that's typical for a password text field. And a prefix is going to be a prefix icon. So let's make a log of this. So a log or a log outline that relates to something more secure. Also, let's create a main axis alignment, because we want the whole column to start at the bottom of the screen, as we can see in here. So it's going to stack up from the bottom and not from the top. So if you add them, it's going to go like this. So let's do that as well. Main axis alignment, and then dot end. Also, because this is our home view, our main widget, we also should wrap the column in a scaffold. Let's do that as well. And a scaffold doesn't have a child, but it does have a body. And also in the scaffold, let's give it a background color. And for now, it's gonna be just, because I specified something in the global class, let's import that as well. And white, cool. So let's start with creating our class. We can copy this exact name, go to the widget folder, and go to File, New, and a Dart file. And I'm gonna call this text fields widgets. It's okay. I'm gonna type in STLS for stateless widget, and I'm gonna copy the exact name. Then we still need to copy the material library, or a Cupertino library in order to make these. So starting with our properties that live on the text field widget object is going to be like we specified our hint text, or prefix icon data, or suffix icon data, which is going to be this here, and the check mark when the email is completed, the obscure text for the password, and a function in the unchanged. Let's not focus on this for now. Let's just focus on the first, the hint text, the prefix icon, and the obscure text for now. Secondly, let's create our constructor so these arrows go away and we can actually use them. So now we can change the container into an actual text field. So let's do that. Text fields. So in our text fields, and the main styling we're going to do is going to be part of the decoration, and this is going to be of type input decoration. When you open these, we can see a lot of, if you hold in command or you tap on the input decoration, you can see everything you can do to the styling. So if you don't know what to do, you can click on it and you can check it from here. So let's start with something that's called our prefix icon. We still need to import our global class, so we can use that color. So the prefix icon data, remember we also passed it in our home view. So this is going to be our mail, and for the text field which for the password, it's going to be the lock. What we also want is our hint text, and we want it to be the same as the hint text. See, as the variable we declared in our constructor, and this is also defined in here as well. So let's see what's actually going on the screen. Let's start by importing our text fields. Let's make sure that our arrows are away. This should be fine. And let's hit hot restart to see what's actually happening on our screen. As you can see here, this is our first, our text fields that we just created. What we actually want as well is to create some padding to it, so let's do that as well. At the level of our column, let's wrap our column with a padding, and let's replace the padding with something like 30. We can just hot reload to see the effect taking place, and that's getting more like it. Looking back at the example, we don't want the underline in here, and this is part of the enabled border functionality, where we set the border size to none. So if I hot reload now, we're gonna see that the border is disappearing when it's not active. So that's the first step. And the second step would be the focused border, and this is when the user is actually tapping on the text field. So if I hot reload now, we can see the border radius, like a little rounded corner with 10 pixel, and the border size is going to be of our blue color, and that's similar to the example we're using. Then if you want to set a little fill, you need to specify the fill to true. This will by default, you can change the color by obviously go to fill color, but I thought it was nice like this, so let's keep this at the moment. Don't worry about the padding for now, we'll change that as well. Then moving on, let's also add our suffix icon, which we didn't yet specify, but we will do in a bit. We can leave that as is. Nothing's going to happen because there is no data at the moment. Let's also add in a label style, which takes in a text style and gives it a color as well. And also let's add a focus color. Then going back up, outside of the decoration property, we can also give a style to our text. We want the font size and the color of the font to be blue. That's okay. Sometimes when you need to hot restart when you do certain changes, like so. Then we also want the cursor color to be of type blue. Then let's also use our function unchanged, which I'll explain in a bit as well. We don't need it at the moment, but let's just paste it in because we're using it here as well. Cool, so now let's go back to our home view and let's add some padding in between these boxes. And we can do that very simply by adding a size box with a certain height value. And let's say I'm gonna use 10. And then just hot reloads, and we can see some nice spacing over here as well. So let's just go back to our text field widget and fix one last thing. So now when we hover it, we can see the email or the hint text stays the same, and that's not what we want. And this is because when we are looking for the hint text, we actually don't need the hint text, but we need to change the label text and use, I mean, it doesn't really matter, hint text. Now if you hot reload now, you can see the text is becoming blue, and when you active it, it's still staying there, which I think is a bit nicer, like so. And then finally, let's just still add in, because we didn't add the, for example, the obscure text property in, so let's do that as well. Obscure text, obscure text. So now we have everything is used, and we can move on. Let's go back to our home view, the Dart file, and at the end of the column, let's add a sized box of 20, because if you look at the example again of the login page, we are gonna start making our own buttons, right? So let's add some vertical padding in here. And again, we are going to create our own button widgets, which we're gonna use 2 times. And we are, because the first one is gonna have, is gonna be like a filled one without a border, and the second one is gonna have a border, but we just gonna create that code for those buttons once. So how do we do that? We these are the properties that are gonna be unique. So we got signup, and we have a boolean that checks if the border is if there is a border or not. So next up, let's go to our widget folder and create a new Dart file. And we're gonna name this button widgets. I always try to keep a consistent way of naming these. You use underscore and widget, so you know it's a widget, and then when you specify the class, you're sure that it's always gonna be unique anyway. Because if I just would use button, it's not really a good idea. That's why I add widget to it as well. So it's easier for you to understand, but also if someone else is looking into your code. Button widget. Let's copy this, and again, let's create a stateless class, stateless widget, and let's import the necessary libraries, material. Starting with our class variables for the button widgets. So it's going to have a title and a boolean checker if it has a border or not. Setting up a constructor that with the title and the border, so we can use it outside of the class. Let's start with removing container, and we can just start with displaying a simple text widget, so we can see that our functionality is actually working. Let's hot reload. Oh, there's a little error. Let's go to, we still need to import the button widget. So that's fine. Going back to button widget, hot reload again, hot restart again. And we can see there is a one sign up. Let's go back to our home view, and we're just checking. I'm just gonna remove this for a sec, just to see that we can see both buttons. Let's hot reload. Let's put a comma as well. There you go. And let's hot reload. So these are our buttons. So let's keep that condition in. So it's actually there, it was just white, and the background is white as well. So next, let's wrap this text widget in a container, and let's give it a height of, let's say, 60. So there's a bit more spacing here. Because the button is gonna be, they have to be tappable or clickable in the future, let's wrap this not with a gesture detector, but with an inkwell. I'm using inkwell because it still gives you the circular animation when you tap it, and we can, instead of we can actually add a border radius to it instead of putting the decoration property on the container. Then we need to wrap this inkwell in an ink, and I'll tell you why in a bit. And we need to wrap to make the ink effect actually work, you need to wrap this in a material widget. You have to do this because you could use raise button, but we don't want all the functionality of a raise button. We want to create our own from scratch, and this is one way of doing this. Then in our ink Let's add a decoration, and this can be of type box decoration, just the same as you would specify it in a container. First decoration property, a color. If it has a border, it needs to be white, otherwise blue. Then again, add that border radius to it of 10. And then to actually visibly see the border, we need to check our Boolean value. When it has a border, we're using a border of width 1 with a medium blue. If it's not, it's actually, we need to do border.from border side and border side.none, which is going to result in no border at all. Let's hot restart to see what's actually happening. So that's cool. Let's just wrap this text widget in the center widget, and let's just hot reload. And you can see when you wrap stuff in the center widget, they will actually scale to the width of what we specified. Going back to our home view widget, let's create the same size box we added between the form fields or the text fields, and this will result in something like this. Let's have a quick look at what we still need to make. Let's also add the forgot password. To add the forget password functionality or link, we can wrap our text field widget for the password section into a column. So let's do that. And the second one would be forgot password, just a text with just a simple style. Let's add this here. Let's just hot reload, hot restart. You can see it's always centered. It's always a good idea to put a comma behind everything, so it's you can see the tree going really nicely. Then on top of the column, we want to add the cross-axis alignment .end, because again, a column, imagine the main axis alignment is vertical, cross-axis is on the x-axis, and we want this to go at the end. So let's hot reload, and this will go to here. Then again, use some consistent padding in your form fields. We can put the size box on top of the forgot password, hot reload, and we are having this. So that's that. So let's move on. Let's see what we are doing next. We have done everything in here. Let's create, I think now let's use our state management to obscure the text for the password and to make it visible if you want it. And by default, it should be obscure. And also let's add the state manager for the email as well. So let's go to the home model. And I've already created a class which is just extending from change notifier. This is necessary if you're used to provider. So firstly, let's add our Boolean to keep track of if our password field is visible or not visible. Secondly, similar approach for the is valid checker. And if you're looking in the global, I just specified just one list item. I mean, normally you would link this to a database, but we're not doing that because we're focusing on front-end stuff at the moment. So this is just checking if that's exactly when you entered in the text field, and this is where the onChanged method is going to be very useful. So when the user is typing, it needs to check if this is equal or exactly the same as the one we specified in the valid email. And then when it is, you're setting the value to true, otherwise false, and you notify the listeners. That's really everything for our home model. So let's go to our home view.dart file, and let's start with the email text field. And let's add the suffix icon data, which is gonna be of check when the model is when it's valid. We want to show the check icon, otherwise there is no icon at all. Also, we need to right underneath our build method, we need to declare our model. Or God, seriously, model, and this would be provider dot. Oh my God, I really can't type today. Crazy. You can import it. Just make sure you also, I mean, if you add, like, I'm sure you know whatever package you're using, you need to specify in your pub spec. I've done that already for you, so you don't need to worry about this. Going back to the home view. After the off, you normally declare the type, and our type is home model, which is a class we specified, and it's also extending from the change notifier class as well. And then lastly, you need, that's why we put it underneath the widget build method, because in here we actually need to specify a context. So which means you can't put this on top of your class because it's going to throw an error because it doesn't know what context is. So be aware of where you put the model. So now I can show you where the unchanged methods is going to come in really handy. And here's where the magic actually is happening. We are calling the model.isValidEmail, and every time we type something, it's checking for that value. So let's see how that works. Let's just hot restart. And remember, the email was test@gmail.com. And now pay attention when I type the last letter. It's gonna give the little icon because it is exactly the same. So that's exactly what we want. Moving on. Then in our text field widget for our passwords, we can put the suffix icon data whenever our model is visible, or when that icon is visible. This is going to be the visibility. You can see it here, or the visibility off. Then also we can change the obscure text to be whenever the model is visible to either false or true. Then let's go to our text field widgets. And let's scroll all the way to our suffix icon. And we can actually wrap this because it needs to be tappable. We could use a simple gesture detector, and we can use the ontap methods in here. And in here, let's specify. So this is basically saying it's always the opposite. So when it's true, it's going to come false. When it's false, it's going to come true. So you don't need to say it's true or false explicitly. This will solve this in one line. Now let's just specify our model. Let's go to our home view and let's just copy it because we've used it in here. Text field, yeah, underneath the build methods. And then we just need to import this provider or the home model and the provider package as well. Again, let's hot restart. Great. I'm seeing my password, and I can visibly see it. The icon is changing and the obscure text is changing, and that's what we want. So I think we've covered everything for the UI bit, and now actually let's go on to the most fun bit, which is gonna be the wavy animation at the top, which is gonna make it like the, let's say, the cherry on the pie of our login page or animated login page. So let's start by going back to our home view, and the main or body is a padding, but we actually, what we want to do is create a stack, because we're gonna stack that this kind of animation at the top, and on top of this is gonna be our UI. So we need to specify the first child, and this is gonna be, again, we're gonna create a new widget that doesn't exist yet, and this is gonna be a wave widget. It's gonna take in a size, which we're gonna specify right underneath the build methods. Then a Y offset is basically where we want to put it on the screen when the screen loads. So let's specify the size property, and this is a media query. Again, we need to specify this underneath the build methods, and this takes in the size of the screen of your current simulator. And you can use the height property, so we are going to be a third of the height of the screen, which, if you look at the example, is somewhere around here. That's where it starts. For me, remember this. This is actually, it's not the blue. The blue is a background. This is actually our. If you look here, that's what our wave widget is going to be. That's why we're going to stack it on top of here. So let's go to our widget folder, and again, let's create a new Dart file. And I'm gonna call this wave widgets, just like the other ones, in a similar way. Let's copy the syntax, and let's create a stateless widget at the moment. And let's import all the necessary libraries. Let's go at the top of our class, and let's specify our main properties. Size, Y offset, and color. Let's create our constructor as well. And secondly, let's convert this stateless widget to a stateful widget. You can press Alt and Enter, and then you get this option and we can convert it to stateful widgets. Why am I using a stateful widget? It's because we are creating an animation controller to control the animation. And whenever you create controllers, you also need to dispose them. So you call super.dispose, and let's grab this and let's dispose it as well. And with every stateful widget, it also has access to the initState method. And you also need to call the superclass superinitState. So after the initState, and in this method, this is actually where all the magic of our app is going to happen. Let's initialize our animation controller with a vsync. And if you're using vsync, you need to extend the state of your class, which you can do here. We can say with ticker provider state mixin. Now let's just add our listener. So all the variables I'm gonna use are gonna be, and don't get scared at first because it's fine. We're gonna have a wave speed, which is gonna be depending on the animation controller times 1080. If you increase this value, this will make it move faster. A full sphere. This is something we are using, like if you're familiar with tree geometry. Mat pi, basically times 2 is equal to a full circle, or you can say 2 pi. A normalizer, which you can see because we're not only doing a consistent wave, the wave is actually normalizing a little bit and then doing this again. So this is what we're going to do, but I'll explain it in a bit as well. This is determining our wave width. So the how thin the curves are going to be together. In our case, it's very smooth and very stretched. And the wave height, of course, that says the name for itself. Before we continue, let's have a quick look at the cosine and what the cosine values actually do to your application. And we have a great example you can check on geogebra.org. And if I'm playing this, for example, you see whatever you put in, let's say as a counter or degrees, in the cosine value or a cosine sine or cosine value, these values are always going to be 1 or minus 1. And if you're familiar with animation, this is something that comes in very handy, because you can make very nice looping animation by just putting in the values, and the only value it's going to return is 1, between minus 1 and 1. So for the normalizer, we're using a cosine because it's actually the opposite. Like the curve is a little bit different, and that's how you can create a little bit of the delay if you're mixing with sine and cosine. So you're going to see in a little bit, I'm going to use sine for something else as well. But let's move on. This is trigonometry in a nutshell, but of course there's much more depth to it. You can make a whole course about this, but I'm not going to go into more detail than this. We just need to import our mat library, and you can do this because Flutter comes in with a mat library. So let's say you type in mat, dart mat, and then we just need to say as mat. You can do it like this. So now this, if you do it like as, you can use this keyword in here. And going back up, underneath our animation controller, we need to specify a waypoints, and this is a list of offsets. And offsets is can be X and Y, and to keep track of the points we create. Because remember, we are gonna move, if I'm looking at the example, this bit, right? We're gonna keep track of X coordinates and Y coordinates. The Y coordinates are always changing, the X are gonna be constant. So underneath our variables, we have to create a for loop. The for loop is gonna start at index of 0, and it's gonna check for the widget size.width of the screen. You need to don't cast it to int, because this is actually a double value, because if you don't do this, it's gonna throw, I mean, it's not really gonna work like the way you want it, because you want to don't cast it to an integer. So remember, this is the width of the screen. That's why we pass in that size property on the class. Then before we even continue, we always need to clear this. So let's wavepoints.clear right at the top. Then at the top of our for loop, we're going to add our main calculation. This is going to be of type or sine, math calculated. And it's going to take the wave speed minus I, because we want we're looping over the index, and we want some changes to happen, times the wave width, which you can change in here. Then underneath calc, let's create our waypoints, and we are actually going to add our offsets to the array. So for the first variable, or x, is going to be consistent, which is just going to go through 0 and the width of the screen. So this is always going to be consistent. Remember, we're creating this kind of wave, so the y is the most important bit. Then secondly, our y value, which is going to be our main calculation in here, times the wave height, times the normalizer, and our widget.y offset. I know if you see this for the first time, it's a bit weird. I messed around it with a little bit. But to be honest, if you're doing this kind of stuff from scratch, there's no other way around it. You need to be familiar with these kind of values and what they do. Otherwise, it's really hard to understand. But I'm not going into much depth about this. Play around with the values yourself and see where you can get. It's always easier to understand it when you're just changing the properties in here and you can actually see what's doing instead of me explaining what's actually going on. But a lot of this is basically a lot to do with a formula. If you don't respect the formulas, it's going to give a much weirder result. So yeah. So let's go back to our home view file and let's import our wave widget. Also remember, we are using a white color, so at the moment we will never see it. So let's at the top of the stacks, let's import a container, which is actually a medium blue color. Let's hot restart. So to actually see something on the screen right now, or see what's actually happening, we need to go back to our wave widget. And all the way at the top, we can see obviously nothing's happening because we are just displaying a container. So let's actually remove that container, and we are going to return a clip path. With a clipper, we still have to create. But the main thing in here is that it's using a polygon, which we're going to add to our custom clipper. And this is just the container that of all the values we specified, remember, at the top in here. So to do this, let's copy this, the clipper widget. And this is going to be our final widget. Let's add it to the Dart file. And again, following the same syntax, we can call it clipper widgets. Then let's create that class, clipper widgets. And when you create a clipper, you need to extend it from custom clipper. There we go. Now it's gonna give an error because it's missing the overrides, and you can simply add them. You can add them manually, or you can make use of the Flutter, Android Studio IDE. We can click on create two missing overrides, which is gonna be specified to the get clip, and you can remove everything that's inside. This is a very important one as well, because when you set this to false, it's never going to update. So we should always specify this to true. Then in our get clip, we need to create a path. And this is going to be just you initialize the path. That's the first step. Second step is going to be, we're going to add a polygon of our wave list, which we are still going to specify at the top. Because if you look at the example, this is our wave list. Then from this point, we need to go all the way here, and then we close the path. So let's do that. So first, now we need to add a line 2 from here to here. So that's specifying the line 2. Remember, we are at the size width because we are at this point at the moment, and all the way to the bottom is size at height. Then going from this corner to this corner, you need to go to the x value of null, which is here, and still on the same height. And then the only thing you need to do is path.close. And then lastly, we still need to return the path we just created. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. Then at the top, to get rid of our wavelist error, we need to specify the variable and also the class constructor, like so. Going to our wave widget file, we can import the package. we need to specify, so we're having an error, right? And you can see clipper can be assigned to the parameter custom clipper path. So we can solve this by adding a type, and type is going to be of type path. So now going back to our home view, our wave widget, you can see the error is gone. This is something you need to specify. Let's just hot restart for a sec. So to see some actual effect, we need to wrap our clip path in a animated builder. Animated builders are really cool. You can say the animation and or animation controller, you can specify it in here. And then of course our builder methods, which takes in a context. And second property is going to be a widget, but we don't need that. And if you don't need it, you can just use an underscore like so. Then we can take our whole clip path in here. Let's cut that out, remove the child, and we will return this directly in the builder method, remove the comma, and add a semicolon at the end. Just hot restart. Now, to actually see the animation, we still need to add the end of our init state. We either need to call forward or we need to call animation controller.repeat because we want the animation to repeat infinitely. So normally, if everything's fine, we should see something working like so, because normally you would call forward, but in our case, that's not very beneficial. So this is our main thing, what's going to happen. You can see it normalizes a bit and it creates this kind of liquidy, cool effect. It gives a very calm feeling to it, which is quite nice. So let's go back to our home view. And if we look at the example again, let's just add in the text in here on top of here as well. So to do that, we can simply, because we're in a stack, we can, underneath the wave widget, we can add our texts in here. And then, let's say I'm centering this. Actually, I'm not centering it. Let's add some padding from the top. Let's say around, I don't know, like 100 in here. And if you want to center this, one option would be we can create, wrap this in a row and then specify the main axis alignment. This main axis alignment dot center. Let's hot reload again. And there we go. It's going to be at the end, at the top. So now, sorry. If I'm toggling the keyword with Command K, we're going to see an issue, right? Because our wave is not reacting to our keyboard and it's just overlapping. And we actually want this to be moving as well. So how do we do this? So firstly, you want to do is we need a way of checking when the keyboard is open. And you can actually do this very easy without importing even any library. This is a Boolean that I created as a keyboard open. And again, this is taken a media query. And you have access to viewInstance.bottom. And whenever our viewInstance.bottom is bigger than 0, this means there's a keyboard involved. And that's one way of checking this. Now going back to our wave widget, we can wrap our wave widget into a animated position widget. So let's give that a duration and a curve. And then let's take the top value and let's check when the keyboard is open. We want to animate it to minus size.height because it's going to go up. And otherwise nothing happens. So let's hot restart this for a second. Cool. I'm going to hit Command K. And you can see the animation is moving with the keyboard. If you don't like the animation or the duration, you can change it here. And you can also change the curve. Well, that was the end of the tutorial. I hope you guys learned something. And if you have any ideas for future projects for this channel, feel free to leave a comment and I'll maybe have a look. Keep learning, guys. Stay at home as well in these kind of weird times in the world. And also enjoy coding and keep up the good work. See you later.